Hi, my name is Marley Beavers, and today I want to demonstrate for you how to make homemade buttermilk biscuits. 9 times out of 10, when you wake up in the morning, you automatically think, what am I going to eat for breakfast? And most of the time, that breakfast is going to include a biscuit. My grandmother would always wake up on Saturday mornings and make these biscuits, and we would wake up to the sweet smell of those biscuits baking in the oven. Today we're going to use the Brenda Gant method, and Brenda Gant is a lady from Andalusia, Alabama, and she owns a bed and breakfast called the Caudle House. And at the Caudle House, she wakes her guests up every morning to the sweet smell of this same biscuits. I'm going to tell you how to incorporate all the ingredients, tell you all the ingredients that you need to know and all the equipment that you need. And then I'm going to show you how to pat out the biscuit dough and how to cut them. And then once we put it on the pan, it's in the oven. For this recipe, you're going to need 4 cups of White Lily self-rising flour, and you're going to need 1/3 cup of solid grease, and I always use Crisco, but you can use other things. And then you're also going to need 1½ cups of whole buttermilk. For this recipe, you have to have buttermilk or it's not going to be a buttermilk biscuit. Before we get started, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 500 degrees. Some of the things you may need for this is you may want to sift your flour, so you're going to need a sifter for that. Or if you don't have a sifter, you can just use a strainer and just tap it against your hand. And another thing you're going to need is a biscuit cutter. And Brenda Gant says that you can use a can, just cut off the end of it, and you can just make your biscuits out of that. But if you're using the can, you have to have both sides cut off, so it's just a round can. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to sift our flour. And you can have a fancy flour sifter, it's not going to make a difference. But I have already sifted my flour, so we're going to go ahead and dump that back in there. So next what we're going to do is you have to make a nest. So when you're making a nest, you're going to use the back of your hand, and you're just going to push the flour tightly against the wall of the bowl. And I always keep my flour in a bowl, but it works anyway. So you just push your hand gently against the side of the bowl and just make that crater in there so that all the flour is going to stay out of your milk and out of your grease once you pour it in there. So once you have that, you're going to get your Crisco or your solid grease or whatever you have. And for Brenda Gant's purposes, you can just make like a large egg size ball of grease. You can measure it out, and that's a great method to do if you haven't made this before. But if you've made it before, you can just get it in your hand and make around a ball of just the size of a large egg. So once you have that, you're just going to put that right down in the middle of your crater that you made. So after that, you're going to get your 1½ cups of buttermilk. And I'm going to open this up for us. And I am going to measure this because I really just don't want my biscuits to be too watery or have to add more flour than I need or anything like that. So you're going to pour your 1 cup and just go ahead and pour it right over that. And then just use your judgment and put 1/3 in there. And Brenda Gant always says, I don't want y'all to get too caught up on measurements. So we're just going to eyeball it and we can adjust at the end. So next what you're going to do is you're just going to squeeze that grease with the milk. And some of the flour is going to fall in, and that's fine. So when we squeeze in everything with the milk, we're just trying to get all the clumps in there and get all of the grease broke up. So after we get all of the grease kind of broken up in there, we're going to use our finger, the outside of our finger, and we're going to pull in some of this flour. You don't want to put too much at first because that's going to cause a mess. So you're just going to keep pulling in and pouring it around, and it's going to start getting thicker. It takes a few minutes to start thickening up, and you honestly think, I'll have a mess on my hands. And it is messy, but it comes out very good and doesn't clump up or anything like that. After, you'll have a smooth biscuit dough once you get done. So we're going to just keep incorporating our flour, and y'all can see how it's getting thicker. It's not so much watery anymore. So once you get here, you're going to want to go under it and just flip it as much as you can, because the bottom of it has flour on it, and it's not getting flour on the top. So you're just going to keep going and just try to keep flipping, because that's going to incorporate more flour into it, and you're going to get that dough consistency that you're looking for. Alright, so once you get to this point where you have that dough, you're going to try to get it all to one side and flip it. And you can just use your best judgment when you think, okay, it's time to take it out of the bowl and put it onto your floured surface. So now what you're going to want to do is you're going to get some flour, and you're going to dust your surface. And this is just making sure that once we pour the dough onto the surface, that it's not going to stick to our countertop. And you can do it on your table or whatever you think, but you just need to have a good amount of flour on there, and then you want to coat your hands, because this stuff is very sticky, and the grease is solid, so it solidifies, and it's very hard to get off even when you're washing your hands. But the flour, it works. You have your surface floured. You're going to want flour on your hands, and if it's sticky, you can just rub that flour in really good, and it all just flakes right off. So for this, you're going to pat out your biscuit dough, and to do this, you just lay it on that floured surface and to pat it out, and it's recommended you pat it out for at least 1 inch in depth. Next, you're going to take your flour that we had earlier, and you're going to dip your biscuit cutter down in it. So once your biscuit cutter is floured and it's not going to stick, you're going to cut your biscuits. And you're just going to cut as many as you can with this 1 inch layer patted down. After you cut these biscuits out, you're going to have dough left over, and that's perfectly fine. Brenda Gant suggests that you save your biscuit dough for apple pies, because you can do fried pies with this same dough. So now that we have all of our biscuits stamped out, once again, I still have flour all over my hands, and that's fine. We're just going to rake it off back into the bowl. And so now we have our greased pan, and with our greased pan, we're going to just pick these perfectly brown biscuits and put them on the pan. And once you put them on the pan, you're going to pop them into that 500-degree oven that you preheated earlier. And there's no exact timeline for these. You're just going to wait and see until they are golden brown on top. And usually when they're golden brown on top, they're also going to be brown on the bottom. And that's exactly what we want. So we got these biscuits on the pan, and they're ready to go in the oven. So now that you know how to make your own biscuit dough, you know the ingredients you need, you know how to incorporate the dough, and you know how to pat out your own biscuits, then you should never want to buy grocery store canned biscuits again, and you'll probably always want to go through the Brenda Gant homemade buttermilk biscuits.